My daughter had spent 3 months preparing for that interview. 3 months, 92 days of coding projects, practice questions, online certifications, and late nights sitting at our kitchen table with a laptop that should have been retired years ago. Every evening after I came home from work, I found Lily there. Headphones on, notes spread across the table, determined to earn something nobody had ever handed her. A chance. That's all she wanted. A chance. Looking back now, it's almost funny, because by the end of that week, people would accuse her of stealing a billion-dollar company. Federal investigators would search our home, news helicopters would circle overhead, and one of the most powerful CEOs in America would publicly swear to destroy her. But on that morning, none of that existed yet. On that morning, she was just my daughter, a 16-year-old girl trying not to be nervous. Dad. I glanced away from the road. Yeah? Do I look okay? I smiled despite myself. She had asked the same question 6 times in 20 minutes. You look great, be honest. I am. Lily looked down at her blazer. It wasn't expensive, it wasn't designer. We bought it at a secondhand store 2 weeks earlier. She had spent nearly an hour picking the least worn one. Everyone else is going to look richer than me. The words hit harder than she realized, because she was probably right. Stone Dynamics didn't recruit from neighborhoods like ours. They recruited from elite schools, wealthy families, places where students arrived in luxury cars instead of 15-year-old pickup trucks with over 200,000 miles on the engine. Lily, she looked up. What? They're interviewing your brain. Another pause. Not your clothes. She laughed softly. That's not how the real world works. Smart kid, too smart sometimes. The enormous glass tower of Stone Dynamics appeared ahead of us. 48 stories of steel, glass, and money. The kind of building designed to remind everyone who held power. Employees streamed through the entrance carrying expensive coffee and expensive confidence. Lily swallowed hard. Wow, fair reaction. Even I felt a little out of place. We parked 3 blocks away because nearby parking cost almost as much as my hourly wage. Then we walked. The morning air was cold. The city rushed around us. People in tailored suits moved quickly across the sidewalks. Nobody noticed us. At least not yet. Ready? I asked. Lily took a deep breath. No, another breath. But let's do it anyway. That's my girl. We entered the building through massive revolving doors. The lobby looked more like a luxury hotel than a corporate headquarters. Marble floors, giant digital displays, modern artwork hanging from walls that probably cost more than my entire house. Lily's eyes widened. This place is ridiculous. I nodded. Agreed. Then she laughed. Some of the tension disappeared from her shoulders. We approached the reception desk. A young woman smiled professionally. Good morning. Lily handed over her interview confirmation. I'm here for the internship program. The receptionist checked her screen. Lily Carter? Yes, you're on the list. Lily visibly relaxed, then everything changed. The elevator doors opened across the lobby. Conversations immediately quieted. Employees straightened their posture. Security personnel became more alert. The atmosphere shifted in a way that's difficult to explain unless you've seen it before. Power had entered the room. I followed everyone's gaze. A woman stepped out of the elevator surrounded by executives. Victoria Stone, CEO of Stone Dynamics, 41 years old, self-made billionaire. Business magazines called her a visionary. Financial analysts called her ruthless. Competitors called her terrifying. She wore a dark gray suit that probably cost more than my truck. Her dark hair was perfectly styled. Her expression suggested she hadn't been impressed by anything in years. She walked through the lobby while executives hurried beside her. Nobody slowed her down. Nobody interrupted her. Then her eyes landed on Lily. Just for a second. Then on me. Then back to Lily. She stopped walking. The entire lobby seemed to freeze. One executive almost walked into her. Victoria studied Lily's blazer, then her shoes, then our worn pickup truck keys hanging from my belt. Her expression hardened immediately. I knew that look. Every working-class parent knows that look. The moment someone decides your worth before you speak. Victoria turned toward the receptionist. Who are they? The receptionist looked confused. "Interview candidate, ma'am." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. "For what position?" "Technology internship program." Silence. Complete silence. Then Victoria laughed, just once. Not because anything was funny. Because she genuinely didn't believe what she'd heard. My stomach tightened. Lily's face went pale. Victoria looked directly at my daughter. "You're here for the internship?" Lily nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Victoria stared for another second, then shook her head. "No." The lobby fell silent. Lily blinked. "Excuse me?" Victoria turned toward two security guards standing nearby. "Remove them." Nobody moved. Nobody seemed sure they'd heard correctly. Victoria repeated herself. Slower this time. Colder. "Remove them from the building." My pulse immediately accelerated. "Ma'am, there must be some misunderstanding." Victoria finally looked at me. "There isn't." Another pause. "Stone Dynamics receives over 10,000 applications every year." Her gaze shifted toward Lily again. "We're not a charity." The words hit like a slap. The entire lobby heard them. Employees, executives, receptionists, everyone. Lily stood perfectly still. I could see the humiliation spreading across her face. The security guards looked uncomfortable. "Good. They should." One of them stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir." I raised a hand, not because I wanted trouble, because I didn't trust myself to speak. Victoria turned away, as if the conversation was already over. Then she delivered one final sentence without looking back. "Next time, apply somewhere more realistic." The elevator doors closed behind her. She disappeared. Just like that. The lobby remained silent. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew where to look. Then Lily quietly picked up her folder. The same folder she'd spent 3 months preparing. The same folder she'd carried into the building believing today might change her future. "Let's go, Dad." Her voice barely worked. We walked toward the exit. Every step felt heavier than the last. Halfway across the lobby, I heard someone call my name. "Mr. Carter." We stopped. A man in an expensive suit hurried through the revolving doors carrying a leather briefcase. Mid-60s, silver hair, breathless, desperate. He looked like he'd run 3 blocks. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes?" The man immediately extended his hand. "My name is Richard Hale." Another pause. "I'm an attorney." My stomach tightened. Wonderful. Exactly what today needed. A lawyer. Then Richard opened his briefcase and removed a sealed envelope. Thick. Official. Old. The kind of document that changes lives. He looked directly at Lily. "I've been searching for you for almost 6 months." The lobby went silent again. Richard swallowed hard, then said the words that would destroy Victoria Stone's world before the day was over. "Miss Carter." Another pause. "You've just inherited 47% of Stone Dynamics." Silence. Complete. Absolute. Silence. Even the security guards stopped breathing. And somewhere 40 floors above us, Victoria Stone had absolutely no idea that the girl she had just thrown out of her building was now the largest shareholder in her company. For 3 full seconds, nobody in the lobby moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed to breathe. 47% of Stone Dynamics. The number hung in the air like something unreal, something impossible. Lily stared at Richard Hale as if he had suddenly started speaking another language. "What?" The word barely escaped her lips. Richard opened the envelope carefully. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from relief. The relief of someone who had finally completed a mission that had consumed months of his life. "Miss Carter, I know this is unexpected." Another pause. "But everything I'm saying is documented and legally binding." My pulse was pounding. There has to be a mistake. Richard immediately shook his head. "There isn't." He handed over several papers. Thick legal documents, official seals, signatures, corporate filings. I didn't understand half of what I was reading, but I understood percentages. 47%. 47% of a company worth billions. The receptionist looked like she might faint. One of the security guards quietly sat down in a nearby chair. Lily stared at the paperwork. "Why?" Richard's expression softened. Because your grandfather left it to you. The world stopped, completely stopped. My blood ran cold. Grandfather? Lily whispered. Richard nodded. William Stone. Silence. The name meant nothing to Lily, but it meant everything to me, because I had heard that name exactly once before. 15 years ago, the night my wife Emma finally told me the truth about her family. A family she had spent years avoiding, a family she never wanted to talk about, a family so wealthy and powerful she wanted nothing to do with them. I looked up sharply. William Stone was Emma's father. Richard nodded. Yes. Lily slowly turned toward me. Her face had gone pale. Mom never told me. I swallowed hard. She didn't tell many people. The lobby remained frozen around us. Employees were pretending not to listen while listening to every word. Richard opened another folder. Mr. Stone passed away 7 months ago. Another pause. His final will remained sealed until certain legal conditions were satisfied. My stomach tightened. What conditions? Richard looked directly at Lily. That you turned 16. Silence. Then Lily laughed, not because anything was funny, because her brain couldn't process what was happening. This is insane, Richard smiled sadly. I imagine it feels that way. Then the elevator doors opened again. The timing couldn't have been worse, or better. Victoria Stone emerged with 6 executives following her. She was in the middle of a conversation when she noticed the crowd, the silence, the attention, the fact that nobody seemed to be working anymore. Her expression hardened immediately. What's going on? Nobody answered. Richard slowly turned around. Victoria's eyes landed on him, then widened slightly. Richard? The attorney nodded. Victoria. Something changed in her expression instantly. Concern. Real concern. Why are you here? Richard held up the documents. The color drained from Victoria's face before he even spoke. She knew. Somehow she already knew. No. Her voice was barely audible. Richard looked almost apologetic. I'm afraid so. Complete silence filled the lobby. Then Richard took a deep breath and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. According to the final will and testament of William Stone, effective immediately, Lily Carter inherits 47% ownership of Stone Dynamics. The room exploded. Not physically, socially. Employees whispered. Executives exchanged stunned looks. Someone dropped a coffee cup. Victoria didn't move. She looked at Lily, then at the documents, then back at Lily, like she was trying to force reality to change through sheer willpower. No. Richard remained calm. The transfer has already been approved. Victoria took a step forward. That's impossible. It's complete. Another pause. The shares transferred at 9 o'clock this morning. My pulse accelerated, because suddenly I understood something. Victoria hadn't humiliated Lily because she knew who she was. She had humiliated her because she didn't know, and now the girl she'd publicly thrown out of the building owned nearly half her company. Victoria looked directly at Lily. For the first time, there was no arrogance in her eyes, only shock, pure shock. Then Lily surprised everyone. I don't want it. The lobby fell silent again. Richard blinked. What? Lily lowered the documents. I don't know anything about billion-dollar companies. Another pause. I came here for an internship. The statement hit harder than anyone expected. Even Victoria looked momentarily caught off guard. Then something darker appeared behind her eyes. Calculation. Fast. Ruthless calculation. She recovered quickly. Too quickly. Miss Carter. Her voice had completely changed. Softer now. Warmer. Friendlier. Fake. I recognized fake when I heard it. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. Lily looked at her. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Lily asked the one question Victoria clearly wasn't prepared for. Was I qualified for the internship? Silence. Complete silence. Victoria didn't answer immediately, because the truth was dangerous. If she said yes, she'd admit she had discriminated against Lily. If she said no, the legal documents in Richard's hand would eventually prove otherwise. Finally, Victoria smiled. Of course. Lily nodded slowly. Then why did you throw me out? The lobby became so quiet I could hear the building's air conditioning system. Victoria's smile vanished, just slightly, but enough. Then Richard cleared his throat. Unfortunately, this conversation will need to continue upstairs. Another pause. The board of directors has already been notified. My stomach tightened. That didn't sound good. Richard checked his watch. They're assembling now. Victoria's expression darkened immediately. She knew what that meant. So did every executive standing behind her. A board meeting. An emergency board meeting. And for the first time in the history of Stone Dynamics, the most important person in that meeting wasn't the CEO. It was a 16-year-old girl holding a folder she had spent 3 months preparing for an internship interview. Then Richard delivered one final piece of news. The kind that changes everything. There's one more thing. Everyone turned toward him. Richard opened another document. His face suddenly looked much more serious, much more concerned. According to Mr. Stone's will. Another pause. Ownership of the shares begins immediately. Silence. Meaning? Victoria asked. Richard looked directly at Lily. Meaning, as of this moment, you have authority to review every financial record in Stone Dynamics. The room froze. Because suddenly this wasn't just about inheritance. It was about access. And judging by the fear that flashed across Victoria Stone's face, there were things hidden in those records that she desperately didn't want anyone to find. The ride to the executive floor felt longer than it actually was. Nobody spoke inside the elevator. Not me, not Lily, not Richard Hale, not Victoria Stone. The silence was thick enough to choke on. 48 floors above the city, one of the most powerful companies in America was preparing for an emergency board meeting because a 16-year-old girl had accidentally become its largest shareholder. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on me. Lily stood beside me, clutching the inheritance documents with both hands. She looked calm from the outside, but I knew her. The way she kept adjusting her grip on the folder, the way her eyes moved, the way she bit the inside of her cheek when she was overwhelmed. She was terrified. And honestly, so was I. The elevator doors opened onto a completely different world. Thick carpets, glass walls overlooking the city, private offices larger than most apartments. Executives rushed through the hallways carrying tablets and phones. Every single one stopped when they saw Lily. Word had already spread. Fast, very fast. People whispered as we passed. Some stared openly. Others pretended not to. None of them were particularly successful. "This is insane," Lily whispered. "That's the third time you've said that today." She glanced at me. "Because it keeps getting more insane." Fair point. Richard led us toward a massive conference room at the end of the corridor. 2 security officers stood outside the doors. They immediately stepped aside when they saw him. Through the glass walls, I could see the board members already assembled inside. 8 men and women, all wealthy, all powerful, all looking extremely unhappy. Then Victoria stopped walking. Richard, the attorney, turned. "Yes?" Victoria's voice dropped lower, colder, more dangerous. "You know exactly what William was like." Richard said nothing. Victoria continued. "He changed his will 6 times in 10 years. Another pause. "How do we know this isn't another mistake?" Richard didn't even blink. "Because I drafted it personally." Silence. Victoria's jaw tightened. The answer clearly wasn't the one she wanted. Then the conference room doors opened. Every conversation inside immediately stopped. 8 pairs of eyes landed on Lily. Nobody looked at me. Nobody cared about me. They were all staring at the teenager who now controlled 47% of their company. Richard gestured toward the room. "Miss Carter." Lily swallowed hard. "Right. Another breath. Okay." Then she walked inside. I followed. Nobody stopped me. The meeting began immediately. One board member, a silver-haired man named Charles Bennett, stood first. "Let's skip the formalities." Another pause. "Is this real?" Richard placed the legal documents on the table. "Yes." Charles sat down heavily. Across the room, another board member rubbed her forehead. Jesus Christ. Nobody disagreed. Then Victoria finally took her seat at the head of the table, the same seat she'd probably occupied for years. The seat of authority, the seat of control. Yet somehow she looked less comfortable than everyone else. Because for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't the most powerful person in the room. Richard cleared his throat. "As of 9 o'clock this morning, Lily Carter holds 47% voting authority within Stone Dynamics." Silence. Furthermore, another pause. The will grants immediate access rights to all corporate records. There it was again, the phrase that kept bothering Victoria. Corporate records, financial records, internal records. Something about those words made her visibly uncomfortable. Then Charles leaned forward. "Miss Carter." Lily looked up. "Yes?" Charles forced a smile. "Would you consider selling your shares?" The room froze. Not even 5 minutes into the meeting. Impressive. Lily blinked. "What?" Another board member jumped in immediately. "You don't need this responsibility." Another pause. "You're 16. Another pause. "You should enjoy your life." Translation: "Give us the company back." Lily looked around the room, then surprised everyone. "How much?" Silence. Complete silence. Charles sat up straighter. "Excuse me?" Lily shrugged. "You want to buy the shares." Another pause. "How much?" Several board members exchanged nervous looks. Victoria didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. She simply watched. Then Charles named a number. 500 million. The room went silent. $500 million. More money than most families could spend in 10 lifetimes. More money than I could even imagine. Yet Lily immediately shook her head. "No." Charles looked shocked. "So did everyone else." "No?" Lily nodded. "Mom taught me something before she died." My chest tightened immediately. Lily rarely talked about Emma. Not because she'd forgotten, because it still hurt. "What did she teach you?" Charles asked. Lily looked down at the documents. Then back up. "Never sell something before you understand why someone wants it." The room froze. Completely froze. Because suddenly a 16-year-old girl sounded a lot smarter than several billionaires. "Then Clara, no." Lily looked directly at Victoria. "Why are they all so desperate to buy my shares?" Nobody answered. Victoria remained silent. Then Richard unexpectedly smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him all day. He looked proud, very proud, like he had just witnessed something he'd been hoping for. Then the conference room doors suddenly burst open. Every head turned. A young executive rushed inside looking pale, panicked, out of breath. "Victoria." Silence. "What?" Victoria snapped. The executive swallowed hard. "The auditors are here." The room immediately changed. Board members stiffened. Charles looked confused. Another director looked worried. Victoria's face lost all color. "What auditors?" The executive's voice trembled. "Federal auditors." Complete silence. Then he delivered the sentence that changed everything again. "They have a warrant." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because federal auditors don't show up with warrants unless something has gone very, very wrong. Then Lily noticed something nobody else did. Victoria wasn't surprised. She was scared. And for the first time since entering Stone Dynamics, my daughter realized the inheritance wasn't the story. It was the trap. Someone had wanted her inside this company before the auditors arrived. And suddenly the question wasn't why William Stone left her 47% of the company. The question was what he had discovered before he died. The room remained frozen for several seconds after the executive mentioned the warrant. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. 8 board members sat around a table worth more than my house, while panic quietly spread across their faces. Federal auditors. A warrant. Those 2 words had changed the atmosphere instantly. The billionaires in the room suddenly looked a lot less powerful. Victoria Stone recovered first. She always did. "Who signed it?" Her voice was calm. Too calm. The executive swallowed hard. "The Department of Justice." Silence. Specifics? Financial misconduct. Another pause. Corporate fraud. Another pause. Misappropriation of shareholder assets. My stomach tightened. Across the table, Charles Bennett slowly removed his glasses. "That's impossible." Nobody looked convinced. Then the conference room doors opened again. This time, nobody needed an introduction. 6 federal investigators entered carrying briefcases and evidence boxes. The woman leading them looked like she hadn't smiled in years. Sharp eyes, sharp posture, sharp everything. She placed a folder on the conference table. "Victoria Stone?" Victoria stood. "Yes." The investigator slid a document across the table. "Federal warrant." Another pause. "Effective immediately." The room went silent as Victoria scanned the paperwork. For the first time all morning, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. Real uncertainty. Then the investigator continued. No one leaves this floor until our team completes the initial review. One board member immediately objected. You can't detain us. The investigator looked at him. Watch me. That ended the discussion. Fast. Then her attention shifted toward Lily. Interesting. My pulse accelerated immediately. The investigator looked at Richard Hale. This is Lily Carter? Richard nodded. It is. The woman studied Lily carefully. Then something unexpected happened. Her expression softened slightly. Just slightly. You've had quite a day. Lily laughed nervously. You could say that. Fair answer. Then the investigators spread throughout the room. Computers were secured. Phones collected. Documents seized. The board members watched helplessly. The company they controlled was being taken apart piece by piece. Then one of the investigators approached their leader and whispered something into her ear. The woman's expression immediately changed. Are you certain? The investigator nodded. Silence followed. Then she turned toward Victoria. There's something you should see. Victoria's face tightened. What? The investigator opened a folder, removed several pages, then placed them on the table. The room went completely silent. Victoria stared at the documents. The color drained from her face. Charles Bennett leaned forward. What is it? No answer. Then Charles grabbed the pages himself. 5 seconds later, he looked just as shocked. No, my pulse accelerated, because whatever was on those papers had frightened people who normally weren't frightened by anything. Then Lily quietly spoke. What's happening? Nobody answered immediately. Finally, the lead investigator looked toward her. Miss Carter. Another pause. According to our preliminary findings, another pause. Someone has stolen nearly $2 billion from Stone Dynamics over the last 6 years. The room exploded. Board members shouting. Executives demanding explanations. Lawyers reaching for phones they no longer possessed. Pure chaos. Then another sentence cut through everything. And every transaction required CEO-level authorization. Silence. Instant silence. Every head turned toward Victoria Stone. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react. She simply stared at the documents, then slowly shook her head. No. The investigator remained calm. The evidence says otherwise. Victoria looked up. Then your evidence is wrong. But her voice lacked conviction. Even she didn't sound convinced. Then, Lily noticed something. I could tell immediately. The way her eyes narrowed, the way she focused, the same look she got when solving difficult coding problems. Dad, I looked over. What? She pointed toward one of the financial reports. Something's off. The investigator heard her. Excuse me? Lily stood, walked around the table, ignored the stares of billionaires and federal agents. Then she pointed toward a transaction buried deep within the report. This account. Silence. What about it? The investigator asked. Lily studied the numbers. The transfer path is fake. The room froze. One investigator frowned. Fake? Lily nodded. Not fake. Another pause. Artificial. Another pause. Like someone wanted you to find it. My stomach tightened immediately, because suddenly, everyone was paying attention. Then Lily moved to another page. Then another. Then another. Her eyes scanned the documents at incredible speed. Finally, she stopped. These weren't hidden. Silence. What? Asked Charles. Lily looked up slowly. They were planted. The room went dead silent. Even the federal investigators stopped moving. Then the lead investigator stepped closer. Explain. Lily pointed toward a series of account numbers. Every fraudulent transaction uses the same encryption signature. Another pause. The same routing structure. Another pause. The same metadata pattern. She looked directly at the investigator. Real criminals don't repeat mistakes 600 times. Silence. Complete silence. Then the investigator's expression changed, because she realized Lily might be right. Victoria slowly looked up from the table. Hope flickered across her face for the first time all day. Then another voice spoke from the doorway. Exactly. Everyone turned. My stomach dropped immediately. An older man stood there. Expensive suit, silver hair, confident smile. He wasn't FBI. He wasn't company staff. Yet somehow he looked completely comfortable walking into a room filled with federal investigators. Richard Hale's face instantly lost all color. No. The man smiled wider. Hello, Richard. Silence. Complete silence. Then Richard whispered the name like he'd just seen a ghost. Daniel Stone. The room froze. Because William Stone only had one son. A son everyone believed had died 20 years ago in a private plane crash. And apparently, just like that, the dead had decided to walk back into the family business. For a moment, nobody in the conference room moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed capable of breathing. Daniel Stone stood in the doorway wearing a perfectly tailored Navy suit and the kind of smile that immediately made me distrust him. The room looked at him the same way people look at a ghost, because according to every public record in existence, Daniel Stone had died 20 years earlier when a private aircraft crashed into the Rocky Mountains during a winter storm. There had been investigations, funerals, obituaries, an entire chapter of the Stone family history built around that tragedy, and yet here he was, very much alive. Richard Hale looked like he might collapse. That's impossible. Daniel chuckled softly. People keep saying that today. The room remained silent. Then Victoria Stone stood up. Who the hell are you? Daniel's eyes shifted toward her. Interesting. Another pause. You spent 12 years running my father's company, and you don't recognize me. Victoria's jaw tightened. Daniel Stone is dead. Daniel smiled. Apparently not. The lead federal investigator immediately stepped forward. Identification. Daniel reached into his jacket. Several people tensed. Security personnel moved. Federal agents reached for weapons. Daniel calmly produced a wallet. Then a passport. Then several legal documents. The investigator reviewed them carefully. Her expression darkened with every page. Finally, she looked up. They're authentic. Silence. Complete silence. Charles Bennett slowly sat back down. Dear God. Daniel entered the room and closed the door behind him. He looked around the conference table as if inspecting an old house he hadn't visited in years. Not much has changed. Then his eyes landed on Lily. For the first time, the smile looked genuine. You must be Lily. Lily nodded cautiously. I guess. Daniel laughed softly. You look exactly like your mother. My stomach tightened immediately. Because unlike everyone else in the room, Daniel wasn't staring at Lily's shares, or her voting rights, or her inheritance. He was looking at her the way family does. That bothered me. Not because it seemed fake, because it seemed real. Then Daniel turned toward Richard Hale. You gave her the documents? Richard nodded. This morning. Good. Another pause. William would have wanted that. Silence followed. Then Victoria stepped forward. Enough. The room froze. Victoria pointed directly at Daniel. I don't care who you are. Another pause. You walk into my company during a federal investigation claiming to be a dead man? Daniel's smile disappeared. Instantly. Your company? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Victoria didn't blink. I've been CEO for 12 years. Daniel nodded slowly. And look what happened. Silence. Then he pointed toward the financial reports scattered across the conference table. $2 billion missing. Another pause. Federal auditors in the building. Another pause. Board members panicking. Another pause. Remarkable leadership. The room went completely silent. Victoria's face hardened. Careful. Daniel laughed. Or what? Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then Lily quietly raised a hand. Every person in the room turned toward her. Can someone explain what's happening? Fair question. Very fair question. Daniel immediately looked toward her. Your grandfather knew something was wrong. Silence. What kind of wrong? Lily asked. Daniel walked toward the conference table, then placed a thick black folder in front of her. My pulse accelerated immediately. Because, unlike the inheritance documents, this folder looked old. Very old. The edges were worn. The cover faded. Like it had been carried for years. Daniel rested a hand on it. William started investigating the company 3 years before he died. The room froze. Charles Bennett looked shocked. Several board members exchanged nervous glances. Daniel continued. At first he thought someone was stealing money. Another pause. Then he realized the money wasn't the real problem. Silence. Then what was? Lily asked. Daniel opened the folder. Hundreds of pages filled the table. Internal reports, corporate memos, photographs, handwritten notes, entire investigations. My blood ran cold, because one photograph immediately stood out. William Stone standing beside Lily's mother, Emma, smiling, happy, alive. Lily gasped softly. Mom. Daniel nodded. Your grandfather adored her. Another pause, which is exactly why he left everything to you. Then he flipped several pages deeper into the file. The room immediately fell silent, because every page contained the same symbol, a black circle surrounding a silver crown, printed everywhere. Corporate reports, bank transfers, executive correspondence, hidden accounts, dozens of them, hundreds of them. The lead federal investigator leaned closer. What is that? Daniel's expression darkened. That's what William discovered. Another pause. A secret organization operating inside Stone Dynamics. Silence. Complete silence. Then Daniel looked directly at Lily. Your grandfather believed they were preparing something. Another pause. Something bigger than fraud. My pulse accelerated, because suddenly $2 billion didn't seem important anymore. Then Daniel opened the final page of the file. The room froze. Every person leaned forward. Every conversation stopped. Because attached to the last page was a photograph taken only 6 months earlier. William Stone sat at a restaurant table speaking with someone. A secret meeting. A private conversation. The image quality wasn't great, but it was good enough. My blood turned to ice. Victoria Stone stared at the photograph, then slowly backed away from the table. No. Lily looked up. What? Nobody answered. Finally, the lead investigator picked up the photo. Her face instantly lost all color. Holy hell. Silence. Complete silence. Then she turned the photograph around so everyone could see it clearly. The second person sitting with William Stone wasn't Daniel. It wasn't a board member. It wasn't a government official. It wasn't a business partner. It was Victoria Stone. And according to the timestamp printed in the corner, the meeting took place 2 days before William changed his will and left 47% of the company to Lily. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The photograph sat in the center of the conference table like a live grenade. Victoria Stone stared at it as if willing it to disappear. The timestamp was impossible to ignore. 6 months ago, 2 days before William Stone rewrote his will, 2 days before he handed nearly half of Stone Dynamics to a granddaughter who didn't even know he existed, the lead federal investigator slowly placed the photo back on the table. Would someone like to explain this? Silence. Complete silence. Every eye in the room turned toward Victoria. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked cornered. Not embarrassed, not angry, cornered. There's a difference. Angry people attack. Cornered people panic. Victoria finally sat down. It's not what you think. Nobody looked convinced. Daniel Stone laughed softly. That's usually a terrible way to start an explanation. Victoria ignored him. Her attention remained fixed on the photograph. William contacted me. Another pause. Not the other way around. The investigator folded her arms. Why? Victoria hesitated. That hesitation lasted only 2 seconds, but it was enough. Everyone noticed. Then she answered, because he thought someone inside the company was trying to kill him. The room froze. Charles Bennett nearly dropped his glasses. One board member gasped. Lily looked completely stunned. My pulse accelerated immediately, because suddenly the inheritance wasn't just an inheritance. It was connected to something much darker. Then Daniel stepped closer. That's interesting. Victoria looked up sharply. Why? Daniel pointed toward the photograph. Because, according to William's private journal, another pause. He stopped trusting you almost a year earlier. Silence. Victoria's expression changed instantly. You read his journals? Daniel smiled. Every page. The room grew quiet again. Then Richard Hale slowly opened another section of William's file. More handwritten notes, more reports, more warnings. Then he stopped on a particular page. His face immediately darkened. No. The investigator looked over. What? Richard turned the notebook around. My blood ran cold. The handwriting belonged to William Stone. Shaky, uneven, but unmistakably personal. One sentence had been underlined 3 separate times. If anything happens to me, do not trust the board. Silence filled the room. Then another sentence appeared beneath it. Victoria is hiding something, but I don't think she's the enemy. Complete silence. Every person in the room read it twice. 3 times. Victoria stared at the words. Her face slowly lost color, because apparently even she had never seen that note before. Then Lily quietly asked the question nobody else wanted to ask. If Victoria isn't the enemy, another pause. Who is? Nobody answered immediately. Then Daniel slowly turned another page. More notes. More names. More investigations. Then his finger stopped on a single paragraph. The room fell silent again. William had written one name repeatedly. Over and over. Circled, highlighted, underlined. My pulse accelerated, because I'd never heard the name before. But Daniel clearly had. The color drained from his face. No. The investigator looked at him. Who is it? Daniel swallowed hard, then spoke the name. Arthur Kane. Silence. Nobody reacted. Nobody except Victoria. Her chair scraped backward so hard it nearly tipped over. Every person in the room immediately noticed. Daniel pointed at her. You know him. Victoria's face had gone completely white. No. Another pause. I mean, she stopped. The damage was already done. Then Lily noticed something. Again, the same look appeared in her eyes. Focus. Pattern recognition. Problem solving. Wait. Everyone turned toward her. Lily grabbed the financial reports. Then William's notes. Then the audit findings. Her eyes moved rapidly across the documents. No way. My stomach tightened. Whenever Lily said no way, something bad usually followed. What? I asked. She pointed toward a list of shell companies connected to the missing $2 billion. These companies. Another pause. They're all fake. The investigator frowned. We know that. Lily shook her head. No. Another pause. I mean they're really fake. Silence. Explain. Lily pulled one of the reports closer. Every company uses the same formation structure. Another pause. The same legal templates. Another pause. The same digital signature. Then she looked up. Her face had gone pale. It's not multiple companies. Complete silence. Then what is it? Lily slowly pointed toward a single name buried inside the records. A name nobody had noticed before. A name hidden behind dozens of layers of paperwork. My blood ran cold, because that name appeared again, and again, and again. Arthur Kane. The room froze. Then the lead investigator whispered the question everyone was thinking. Who the hell is Arthur Kane? Silence followed. Then a voice answered from the doorway. That depends. Everyone turned. My stomach dropped instantly, because standing, there was a man in his 60s, wearing an expensive black suit, gray hair, calm smile, completely relaxed, like he belonged there, like he owned the room, like he had been listening the entire time. The stranger slowly stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Then he smiled directly at Lily. Some people call me a businessman. Silence. Some people call me a philanthropist. Another pause. And apparently, his eyes drifted toward the investigation files. Your grandfather called me a problem. The room went dead silent. Because nobody had invited Arthur Kane, and somehow, that made his arrival even more terrifying. The room fell into complete silence. Arthur Kane stood just inside the conference room doors with the confidence of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. He wasn't surrounded by lawyers. He wasn't accompanied by security. He didn't need either. The way people reacted to him told me everything I needed to know. Federal investigators stiffened. Board members looked uncomfortable. Victoria Stone looked terrified. Real fear, the kind that can't be faked. Arthur smiled politely and adjusted his cufflinks. Please. Another pause. Don't let me interrupt. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. Then the lead investigator stepped forward. How did you get into this building? Arthur glanced at her badge. The same way I get into most buildings. Another pause. I own part of it. The answer wasn't technically illegal. It was somehow worse. Then his attention shifted toward Lily. He studied her for several seconds, not like a businessman evaluating an asset, more like a chess player evaluating an opponent. My instincts immediately screamed danger. Arthur finally smiled. You look just like Emma. My pulse accelerated instantly. Nobody outside our family used my wife's name. Arthur noticed my reaction immediately. Hunter Carter. He nodded respectfully. I've heard a great deal about you. I didn't like that, not one bit. Funny. I crossed my arms. I've never heard of you. Arthur laughed softly. That was intentional. Silence followed. Then Daniel Stone stepped forward. You should leave. Arthur turned toward him. The smile remained. The warmth disappeared. Daniel. Another pause. Still pretending to be dead? The room froze. Because somehow Arthur wasn't surprised to see him, not even slightly. Daniel's expression hardened. You murdered my father. Complete silence. Arthur blinked once. Then sighed. That's a very serious accusation. It's the truth. Arthur looked around the conference room. Then toward the federal investigators. Then toward the board members. Finally back toward Daniel. Do you have proof? Silence. Daniel didn't answer, because proof and suspicion are not the same thing. Arthur knew it. Everyone knew it. Then Lily suddenly spoke. I do. The room turned toward her instantly. Arthur's smile faded slightly. Excuse me? Lily stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. She picked up William Stone's investigation file and opened it. My grandfather spent 3 years investigating someone. Another pause. Someone connected to every missing dollar. Another pause. Every shell company. Another pause. Every hidden account. Arthur's expression remained calm, but I noticed something. His eyes had stopped smiling. Lily continued. And every road leads back to you. Silence filled the room. Arthur stared at her for several seconds, then laughed. Actually laughed. That's adorable. My jaw tightened. Lily didn't react. Arthur walked toward the conference table. Do you know how many investigations I've survived? Another pause. How many prosecutors? Another pause. How many journalists? Another pause. How many politicians? He leaned forward slightly. Your grandfather wasn't the first person who thought he had discovered something. The confidence in his voice bothered me, not because it sounded fake, because it sounded earned. Then one of the federal investigators approached with a tablet. Ma'am. The lead investigator looked over. What? The investigator swallowed hard. We found something. Silence. Then she handed over the device. The lead investigator's expression immediately changed. Confusion. Then surprise. Then concern. Arthur watched her carefully. What's wrong? Nobody answered immediately. Finally, the investigator looked up. Arthur Kane owns none of the shell companies. The room froze. Daniel looked stunned. Victoria looked confused. Even Lily blinked. What? The investigator turned the tablet around. Corporate ownership records filled the screen. Hundreds of companies. Hundreds of transactions. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Then billions. Yet Arthur Kane's name appeared nowhere. Not once. My stomach tightened, because that didn't make sense. Then Lily grabbed the tablet. Her eyes scanned the records rapidly, faster than anyone else in the room. 10 seconds passed. 15. 20. Then her face suddenly changed. Oh, that wasn't good. Not at all. Arthur noticed immediately. You found it. Lily slowly looked up. The ownership trail is fake. Silence. Arthur smiled again. Very good. The room went still. Lily zoomed into the records. Someone removed your name. Another pause. Years ago. Another pause. Professionally. The investigator frowned. Can you restore it? Lily's fingers flew across the screen. Databases. Archives. Historical records. Backups. Millions of lines of information. Then she stopped. My blood ran cold. Because she looked scared. Truly scared. Dad. My pulse accelerated. What? Lily slowly turned the screen toward us. One name appeared. Just one. Not Arthur Kane, not Victoria Stone, not Daniel Stone. Someone else. Someone nobody expected. The room froze. Victoria Stone looked at the screen, then immediately backed away from the table. No. Daniel Stone whispered the same word. No. The lead investigator stared at the display. Her face lost all color. Complete silence followed. Then Lily spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. The money wasn't stolen from Stone Dynamics. Another pause. It was moved. Silence. Complete silence. Moved where? I asked. Lily looked down at the name on the screen, then back up. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. Into an account owned by William Stone. Nobody breathed. Nobody moved. Because suddenly the victim had become the prime suspect, and the dead founder of Stone Dynamics had just been connected to the disappearance of $2 billion. The room looked like it had forgotten how to breathe. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Every eye remained fixed on the screen in Lily's hands. William Stone, the founder, the victim, the man whose death had triggered everything. According to the records, the missing $2 billion had ultimately landed in accounts connected directly to him. The silence stretched longer and longer. Finally, Charles Bennett spoke. That's impossible. Nobody disagreed. Because it was impossible. William Stone had spent the last years of his life investigating the missing money. He had rewritten his will. He had hired private investigators. He had documented everything. Why would he expose a crime he was committing himself? Then Arthur Kane smiled, the first genuine smile anyone had seen from him. Now you're asking the right questions. Daniel Stone immediately slammed a hand onto the conference table. No. Another pause. This is fabricated. Arthur looked amused. Perhaps. Another pause. Can you prove it? Daniel couldn't answer. Because once again, suspicion wasn't proof. And the documents sitting in front of them looked very real. Then the lead federal investigator stepped toward Lily. Show me everything. Lily handed over the tablet. The woman studied the files carefully. Then she frowned. This doesn't make sense. My pulse accelerated. Why? The investigator pointed toward a series of transactions. The money moved after William Stone died. Silence followed. Then the room froze again. Because everyone immediately understood the problem. William Stone couldn't transfer billions of dollars after his death, unless someone else controlled the accounts. Arthur Kane's smile vanished. Just slightly, but enough. Lily noticed. So did I. Then Lily stepped forward. Wait. Nobody spoke. She took the tablet back and enlarged the transaction history. Hundreds of transfers appeared, then thousands. The deeper she dug, the stranger it became. No way. My stomach tightened immediately. What now? Lily pointed toward a hidden authorization field buried inside the records. These transfers weren't approved by William. Silence. Then who approved them? Lily zoomed further. The room leaned in, even Arthur Kane. Then a name appeared. One name. The room exploded. Victoria? Charles Bennett actually stood up. Victoria Stone looked completely stunned. What? Lily stared at the screen, then looked at Victoria, then back at the screen. Every transfer authorization uses your executive credentials. Silence. Complete silence. Victoria shook her head immediately. No. Another pause. No. That's impossible. The federal investigators moved instantly. 2 agents stepped beside her, not arresting her. Not yet, but close enough to matter. Victoria's face lost all color. I didn't authorize anything. Arthur Kane folded his arms. Interesting. The room grew colder. Much colder. Then Lily surprised everyone. She's telling the truth. Silence. Every head turned toward her. Victoria blinked. What? Lily pointed toward the authorization logs. The credentials are yours. Another pause. But the behavior isn't. The investigator frowned. Explain. Lily turned the screen around. Look at the timestamps. The room studied the records. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then it clicked. My blood ran cold. because several of the transactions occurred while Victoria was publicly speaking at conferences, appearing on live television, attending board meetings, hundreds of miles away. Someone cloned her access. The room fell silent. Then the lead investigator nodded slowly. "Can that be done?" Lily laughed once. No humor. "If someone had enough money?" Another pause. "Absolutely." Arthur Kane stopped smiling altogether. Then the conference room doors burst open again. Everyone jumped. A young federal agent sprinted inside. Out of breath. Panicked. "Ma'am." The lead investigator looked annoyed. "What?" The agent swallowed hard. "We found the private investigator." Silence. Daniel immediately stepped forward. "What private investigator?" "The one William Stone hired." My pulse accelerated. Because according to the file, that investigator had disappeared almost a year ago. The agent's expression darkened. "He's alive." The room froze. "Where?" Daniel demanded. The young agent looked around nervously, then handed over a photograph. The lead investigator stared at it. Her face instantly lost color. Complete silence followed. Then she whispered, "Holy hell." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Finally, she turned the photograph around. My blood turned to ice. Because the missing investigator wasn't in hiding. He wasn't overseas. He wasn't dead. The photograph showed him sitting in a hospital room, weak, thin, connected to medical equipment. And standing beside his bed was someone none of us expected. Not Arthur Kane, not Victoria Stone, not Daniel Stone. It was Richard Hale, William Stone's trusted attorney, the man who had delivered Lily's inheritance, the man who had spent the entire day helping us. And according to the timestamp on the photograph, he had visited the investigator less than 24 hours earlier. Then Lily quietly spoke the words nobody wanted to hear. "I think we're investigating the wrong people." The room went completely silent. Because for the first time all day, Richard Hale wasn't in the room. And suddenly that felt very important. The room remained silent long after Lily spoke. "I think we're investigating the wrong people." Nobody wanted to admit it, because if she was right, then everything we believed during the last 24 hours was wrong. The fraud, the inheritance, Arthur Kane, Victoria Stone, Daniel Stone, the missing money. Every theory suddenly looked unstable. Every assumption suddenly felt dangerous. The lead federal investigator grabbed the photograph again. Richard Hale stood beside the missing investigator's hospital bed. There was no mistaking him. Same suit, same silver hair, same briefcase, same man. "When was this taken?" she asked. The young agent checked his notes. "Yesterday morning." Silence. "And Richard never mentioned it?" "No, ma'am." My stomach tightened. Because Richard had been with us nearly all day. He had delivered Lily's inheritance, guided us through the board meeting, explained William Stone's will, yet somehow he forgot to mention that he had secretly visited the most important witness in the entire investigation. That wasn't an oversight. That was a choice. Then Daniel Stone slowly sat down. For the first time since his dramatic return, he looked uncertain. No. Another pause. Richard wouldn't do this. Arthur Kane laughed softly. That's exactly why he would. Nobody liked that answer. Then Lily suddenly froze. Her eyes locked onto the photograph. Completely focused. "Wait." Everyone turned toward her. She grabbed the image and zoomed in on the hospital room background. Most people wouldn't have noticed anything. Lily wasn't most people. "Dad." My pulse accelerated immediately. "What?" She pointed toward a reflection visible in a nearby window. Tiny, blurry, easy to miss. "There's someone else." The room leaned forward. The federal investigators enlarged the image, pixel by pixel. Slowly, the reflection became clearer. My blood ran cold, because Richard Hale wasn't alone during the visit. Another person stood beside him, mostly hidden. Face partially obscured, yet visible enough, just enough. Victoria immediately stood up. "No." Silence followed. Then she whispered it again. "No." The investigator looked at her. "You recognize him?" Victoria's face had gone completely white. "That's impossible." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Daniel stepped closer to the screen. His expression instantly darkened. "Who is it?" Victoria didn't answer. Finally, Arthur Kane did. His voice was unusually serious. "That's Michael Voss." The room froze. The name clearly meant something. Unfortunately, not to me. "Who?" I asked. Arthur didn't take his eyes off the image. "Former Chief Financial Officer of Stone Dynamics." Silence. "Former?" the lead investigator asked. Arthur nodded slowly. "He disappeared 8 years ago." Complete silence. Then another realization hit. "Disappeared?" Arthur looked toward me. "Vanished." Another pause. "Along with the first $300 million. My stomach tightened immediately. Because suddenly the timeline was expanding. 8 years. Not 6 months. Not 1 year. 8 years. Then Lily started typing. Fast. Very fast. Her fingers moved across the keyboard while everyone else argued. Corporate records appeared. Archived reports. Historical data. Then her face changed. "Oh my God." Silence. Complete silence. Every person in the room stopped talking. Because when Lily sounded shocked, people listened. "What?" I asked. She slowly turned the laptop around. My blood turned to ice. Because the screen displayed dozens of names. Executives, accountants, auditors, lawyers, employees, all connected to Stone Dynamics, all missing, all dead, or supposedly dead. The dates stretched back nearly a decade. "These aren't random," Lily whispered. Another pause. "They're connected." The lead investigator stepped closer. "Connected how?" Lily highlighted a series of internal reports. Every missing person had worked on the same project. Every single one. Then she opened the project file. The room went completely silent. Project Legacy. Nobody recognized the name. Nobody except Victoria. Her chair nearly tipped over. "No." Daniel turned toward her. "You know what that is." Victoria looked sick. Genuinely sick. "William created it." Silence. "For what?" Daniel demanded. Victoria swallowed hard. "To find the leak." The room froze. Then everything started fitting together. The missing executives. The vanished CFO. The hidden money. The inheritance. William Stone had known someone was stealing from Stone Dynamics. So he created a secret internal investigation, Project Legacy, and every person connected to it had either disappeared or died. Then the conference room phone rang. Loud, sharp, unexpected. Everyone jumped. Nobody moved toward it. The phone rang again. Then again. Then again. Finally, the lead investigator answered. "This is Agent Brooks." Silence. Her face instantly changed. Complete shock. "What?" Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. The room watched her listen. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. 30 seconds. Then she slowly lowered the receiver. The color had completely drained from her face. "We found Richard Hale." Silence. "Where?" Daniel asked. Agent Brooks looked around the room, then delivered the sentence that shattered everything one more time. "Dead." Complete silence. Absolute silence. Then she continued. "His car went off a bridge 20 minutes ago. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because Richard Hale had been alive less than an hour earlier. He had been helping us, talking to us, guiding us, and now he was dead." Then Lily looked down at her laptop. Her face instantly lost all color. "Dad." My stomach dropped. "What?" She slowly turned the screen toward me. A new email had just arrived. Sent exactly 3 minutes earlier. Sent from Richard Hale's private account. Sent after his reported death. The subject line contained only 4 words. "If you want the truth." Then Lily opened the message. Attached was a single video file, and beneath it, one final sentence. "Trust no one in that room." Nobody spoke after reading the message. The conference room felt frozen in time. Richard Hale was dead, at least according to the police report. Yet somehow an email had arrived from his account 3 minutes after the accident. Attached was a video file, and a warning. "Trust no one in that room." The words seemed to linger in the air. Heavy, dangerous, final. Every person around the table immediately started looking at everyone else differently. Federal investigators, board members, Daniel Stone, Victoria Stone, Arthur Kane. Suspicion spread like poison. Lily stared at the screen. This could be fake. Agent Brooks nodded. It could. Another pause. Open it anyway. Fair point. Lily clicked the video file. The conference room lights reflected across her laptop screen as the file loaded. For 3 long seconds, nothing happened. Then, an image appeared. Richard Hale, alive. Sitting behind a desk, the timestamp showed it had been recorded earlier that morning. Before the board meeting. Before the investigation. Before everything spiraled out of control, Richard looked exhausted. His tie was loose. His eyes were bloodshot, like a man who hadn't slept in days. Then he spoke. If you're watching this, he paused. I'm probably dead. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Richard continued. I've spent 11 years helping William Stone uncover the truth. Another pause, and 11 years pretending not to know what we found. The room went silent. Then Richard leaned closer to the camera. William wasn't stealing money. Across the table, Arthur Kane closed his eyes. Just for a second. Richard continued. The $2 billion never disappeared. Another pause. It was moved. Another pause. Hidden. Another pause. Protected. My pulse accelerated, because suddenly Project Legacy made sense. Then Richard opened a folder beside him. Dozens of documents appeared. Financial records. Transfer logs. Security reports. William discovered something inside Stone Dynamics. Silence. Something worth killing for. Then the video flickered briefly. Richard looked over his shoulder, like he was afraid someone might be listening. Then he lowered his voice. The money was never the objective. Another pause. The objective was control. The room froze. Arthur Kane's expression darkened. Victoria looked confused. Daniel looked terrified. Then Richard revealed a photograph. An old photograph. At least 20 years old. My stomach dropped instantly, because the image showed 4 people standing together in front of the original Stone Dynamics headquarters. William Stone, Arthur Kane, Daniel Stone, and a 4th man. A man I had never seen before. Yet somehow everyone else immediately recognized him. Victoria's face lost all color. No. Daniel whispered the same word. No. Richard pointed directly at the photograph. This is the man William feared. Silence. Complete silence. Then he said the name, Elias Mercer. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Richard continued. 20 years ago, Mercer helped create Stone Dynamics. Another pause. 5 years later, William forced him out. Another pause. 3 years after that, Mercer vanished. Agent Brooks frowned. What does this have to do with the money? Richard looked directly into the camera. Everything. Then he opened another file, a corporate ownership structure, hidden companies, offshore trusts, secret accounts. Thousands of pages. Then one name appeared repeatedly. Not Arthur Kane, not Victoria Stone, not Daniel Stone, Elias Mercer. Silence filled the room. Then Richard delivered the sentence that changed everything. Elias Mercer never disappeared. My pulse stopped. Then the video paused unexpectedly. Static flooded the screen. Distorted audio crackled through the laptop speakers. For a moment nobody spoke. Then the image returned. Richard looked frightened now, truly frightened. If anything happens to me. Another pause. Mercer has already won. Then the camera shifted slightly. Just enough. My blood instantly turned to ice, because someone was standing behind Richard. A shadow. Out of focus. Watching him, Richard clearly didn't know. Then the shadow moved. 1 step forward. The video abruptly ended. Black screen. Silence. Complete silence. Nobody moved for several seconds. Then Agent Brooks immediately stood up. Find Mercer. Federal agents rushed from the room. Phones appeared. Orders were shouted. The entire investigation shifted directions in real time. Then Lily suddenly froze. Completely froze. I knew that look. Lily. No response. Lily. Her eyes remained locked on the laptop. Dad. My stomach tightened immediately. What? She replayed the final 2 seconds of the video. Again, then again, then again. The shadow behind Richard appeared briefly. Blurry. Distorted. Hard to identify. Then Lily enhanced the image. Once. Twice. 3 times. The room slowly leaned closer, because the figure was becoming clearer. more recognizable. Then the enhancement finished. Silence exploded across the conference room. Victoria stood up so fast her chair crashed backward. Daniel looked like he had been punched. Arthur Kane stopped breathing. Even Agent Brooks froze, because the shadow standing behind Richard Hale moments before his death wasn't Elias Mercer. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't an assassin. It was someone sitting in that very room earlier today. Someone everyone trusted. Someone nobody suspected. The image sharpened one final time, and the face staring back at us belonged to Charles Bennett, member of the board of directors for the last 17 years, William Stone's closest friend. And apparently, the man standing behind Richard Hale just before he died. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The enhanced image remained frozen on the conference room screen. Charles Bennett stared back at us from the final seconds of Richard Hale's video. Not a blurry figure. Not a shadow. Not a possibility. Him. Clear enough. Detailed enough. Damning enough. The silence felt endless. Then Charles slowly stood up. His expression remained calm, almost amused. Well, another pause. That took longer than I expected. The room exploded. Board members jumped from their chairs. Federal agents rushed forward. Victoria looked genuinely horrified. Daniel Stone looked ready to kill someone. Agent Brooks immediately drew her weapon. Don't move. Charles laughed softly. Relax. Another pause. If I wanted to run, I would have left hours ago. Nobody found that reassuring. Then Charles looked toward Lily. You know what's funny? Silence. I actually underestimated you. My pulse accelerated, because men like Charles didn't confess unless they believed they still had control, and that usually meant they did. Then Agent Brooks stepped closer. Hands where I can see them. Charles raised both hands, perfectly calm, of course. Another pause. But before we continue, another pause. You should know something. Nobody spoke. Charles smiled. Richard Hale wasn't murdered because of the money. Silence. Then why? Daniel demanded. Charles turned toward him. Because he finally discovered where William hid it. The room froze. Because despite everything, we still didn't know. $2 billion. Gone. Hidden. Protected. Everyone had been chasing it for years. Then Charles nodded toward Lily. Your grandfather wasn't stealing from the company. Another pause. He was stealing it back. Complete silence. Charles slowly sat down again, as if this were still a normal board meeting. 20 years ago, Stone Dynamics wasn't just a company. Another pause. It was an experiment. Arthur Kane's face hardened instantly. Don't. Charles smiled. Why? Another pause. We're past secrets now. Then Charles looked directly at Lily. Your grandfather built the company. Another pause. Elias Mercer built the technology. Another pause. Arthur funded the expansion. Another pause. And Daniel. He glanced toward Daniel Stone, was supposed to inherit everything. The room remained silent. Then Charles laughed. Unfortunately, people get greedy. My stomach tightened, because finally, pieces were beginning to fit together. Then Charles leaned forward. William discovered Mercer had created a parallel ownership structure. Another pause. A hidden network. Another pause. A shadow company that would eventually seize control of Stone Dynamics. Agent Brooks frowned. Project Legacy. Charles nodded. Exactly. Another pause. William spent years trying to stop it. Then he pointed toward the investigation files. The $2 billion wasn't stolen. Another pause. It was moved into trust accounts William controlled. Silence. For what purpose? Lily asked. Charles looked at her. To protect the company from Mercer. Complete silence. Then Victoria suddenly spoke. Where is Mercer? Charles smiled. The kind of smile that immediately made my skin crawl. That's the wrong question. My pulse accelerated, because I'd heard that phrase before. Usually right before something terrible happened. Then Charles slowly reached into his jacket. Federal agents immediately raised weapons. Don't, Agent Brooks shouted. Charles stopped, then slowly removed a small envelope. Nothing dangerous. Just paper. He placed it on the table. The right question is, another pause. Where has Mercer been? Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Charles slid the envelope toward Lily. Open it. My instincts screamed against it. But Lily reached forward anyway. She opened the envelope, pulled out a single photograph, then froze, completely froze. My stomach dropped immediately. Lily? No answer. Daniel grabbed the photograph next. The color instantly drained from his face. Then Victoria looked, then Agent Brooks, then Arthur Kane. One by one, every person reacted exactly the same way. Shock, complete shock. Finally, Lily turned the photograph around so I could see it. My blood turned to ice, because the image showed William Stone standing beside Elias Mercer, smiling, shaking hands, working together, not 20 years ago, not 10 years ago, 6 months ago, 6 months, just months before William died. The room went silent. Then Charles nodded slowly. Now you're starting to understand. Silence. Complete silence. Then he delivered the sentence that shattered everything one final time. William Stone never stopped working with Elias Mercer. Nobody breathed. Nobody moved. Then Charles smiled. And if that's true, another pause. What if William wasn't the victim? The conference room felt colder than ice, because suddenly a terrifying possibility emerged. What if the founder hadn't been fighting the conspiracy? What if he had been leading it? Then every phone in the room vibrated simultaneously. Every single one. Federal agents, executives, board members. Everyone. Agent Brooks checked hers first. Her face instantly lost all color. No. Silence followed. What? Daniel asked. Brooks looked up slowly. The FBI just issued a nationwide alert. Another pause. Elias Mercer has been found. The room froze. Where? Victoria whispered. Agent Brooks swallowed hard, then delivered the answer. At William Stone's private estate, complete silence. Then she looked at the rest of the message, and her face somehow became even paler. He's not alone. My pulse accelerated. Who is with him? Brooks stared at the screen for several seconds, then slowly looked toward Lily. According to the report, another pause. William Stone is alive. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Nobody even seemed capable of processing what Agent Brooks had just said. William Stone is alive. The words echoed through the conference room like a bomb blast. Every assumption, every investigation, every accusation, every theory. Destroyed in a single sentence. Daniel Stone looked like he had seen a ghost for the second time in one day. No. His voice cracked. No. Victoria slowly sat down. The color had completely drained from her face. Arthur Kane closed his eyes, not surprised, not shocked, resigned. Lily stared at the table, motionless. Then Agent Brooks's phone rang again. She answered immediately, listened, said nothing, then looked up. A helicopter is waiting on the roof. Silence. For who? I asked. Brooks swallowed. For all of us. 30 minutes later, we were flying toward William Stone's private estate. The entire trip felt unreal. Nobody spoke much. Nobody knew what to say. Because dead people weren't supposed to come back. Yet this was now the second supposedly dead billionaire we'd discovered in 24 hours. The estate sat on a remote peninsula, overlooking Lake Erie. Massive, private, hidden behind miles of forest and security fencing. Federal vehicles surrounded the property. Tactical teams occupied every entrance. News helicopters circled overhead. The entire country was about to learn the truth. We entered through the front gates, then through the mansion, then into a private library overlooking the lake. And there he was, William Stone, 82 years old, thin, gray-haired, alive, completely alive. Lily stopped walking. Tears immediately filled her eyes. Because despite never meeting him, she knew exactly who he was. The photographs, the letters, the will, the stories. William slowly stood up. His eyes landed on Lily, then softened instantly. Hello, sweetheart. Silence filled the room. Then Lily whispered the only question that mattered. Why? William smiled sadly. Because I ran out of time. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then another figure stepped from the shadows. Elias Mercer, the most hunted man in the investigation, the supposed mastermind, the ghost behind 20 years of conspiracies. Yet he didn't look like a criminal. He looked tired, exhausted, Old. William gestured toward him. Elias isn't your enemy. Arthur Kane laughed bitterly. Of course he isn't. The room tensed immediately. William looked toward Arthur. No. Another pause. You are. Silence. Complete silence. Then William walked to a nearby table and opened a thick file. 22 years ago, 4 people built Stone Dynamics. Another pause. Me. Another pause. Elias. Another pause. Arthur. Another pause. And my son Daniel. Daniel stared in disbelief. William continued. Then Arthur created a parallel ownership network. Another pause. A system designed to eventually seize control of everything we built. Arthur's face hardened. You have no proof. William smiled. Actually, I do. Then he handed a flash drive to Agent Brooks. The room held its breath. Brooks connected it to her laptop. Files immediately appeared. Thousands of them. Bank records, secret contracts, corporate transfers, offshore trusts, decades of evidence, every missing dollar, every hidden account, every shell company, all connected to one person. Arthur Kane. The room exploded. Federal agents moved instantly. Arthur tried to back away. Too late. Handcuffs appeared. Weapons drawn. Escape routes blocked. The game was over. Arthur laughed softly as agents surrounded him. Do you know what's funny? Nobody answered. Arthur looked directly at William. I almost won. William nodded. Almost. Then Arthur was escorted away. Just like that. 20 years of manipulation ended in less than 20 seconds. Silence settled across the library. Finally, Daniel looked toward his father. Why fake your death? William's expression grew heavy. Because once I realized how deep Arthur's network had become. Another pause. The only way to investigate him was to disappear. Then he looked toward Lily. And because I needed time to find the right heir, Lily blinked. Me? William smiled. Your mother was the best thing I ever did. Tears filled Lily's eyes immediately. William continued. You remind me of her. Silence. Then he laughed softly. Fortunately, you're smarter. That broke the tension. Even Lily laughed through the tears. The next 6 months changed everything. Arthur Kane was convicted on dozens of federal charges. The hidden ownership network collapsed. The missing $2 billion was recovered. Daniel Stone rejoined the company. Victoria remained CEO, but under a completely restructured board. Project Legacy became public. William Stone finally revealed the truth behind his disappearance. And Lily Carter became the youngest major shareholder in Stone Dynamics history. But that's not what mattered most. 1 year later, I was back in my garage, right where I'd always belonged, fixing trucks, drinking bad coffee, complaining about old engines, normal life, the kind of life I thought we had lost forever. Then one snowy afternoon, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Lily looked out the window and smiled immediately. He's here. William Stone stepped out of the vehicle carrying a box of donuts. The billionaire founder of a global corporation had become a regular visitor, mostly because his granddaughter kept beating him at chess. 5 minutes later, another car arrived. Then another. Victoria, Daniel, even Elias Mercer. Somehow, our little garage had become the unofficial headquarters for family dinners. I watched them through the office window, laughing, arguing, living. Lily looked happier than I had seen her in years. Then William sat beside her and handed over a folder. She groaned immediately. Homework? William smiled. Board meeting notes. Lily rolled her eyes. That's worse. Everyone laughed, including me, because after everything we had survived, that sound mattered more than the money, more than the company, more than the inheritance. Family. That's what William had been trying to protect all along. Not Stone Dynamics, not his fortune, not his legacy. Family. And for the first time in a very long time, it felt like we finally had one.